sheep in Jesus' name, chapter 18. And this chapter picks up right after the last one ended, literally the very next moment. So let me just read the last sentence of the last chapter. It said, the Mark Adams family sat quietly after Gabe hung up for a few moments, as if they had to wait for Gabe's light to diminish. It was Mark who broke the silence. That boy is a trip. Anyway, so if you'll look over to your right, kiddos, that is the little strip mall where Master Brian had his own little taekwondo studio. He pulled into the mall and drove over to where there was now a hair salon. This little corner area was his studio, and it was where Eric trained your grandma for the mart. As you guys might know, a few years later, Master Brian decided to go into business with Master Apple, and together they own a bunch of Apple martial arts studios. During the year that Mom trained, right inside that studio, 8 guys came in and attacked Eric, and they beat him badly, and they hung him from a steel plate where the kicking pad had been hanging. It was a really bad time. So, Dad, that was the James and Tommy Crane episode, right? Well, one of them, yes. He sighed and started to pull out, but Joey drove up beside him, so he waited while Joey probably told the same story to his wife. They pulled away together and drove 3 or so miles from the strip mall, made a few turns. Now, Mark said, if you'll look over on your left up here, that is the elementary school that Joey and I went to. Again, Mark pulled into the parking lot. Everyone looked, even Emily, who'd been asleep up until they'd stopped at the strip mall. Looks kind of run down, Bella said. Mark nodded. It actually looks like it's not in use anymore, he murmured. Hey, maybe it's time to buy another Gabe Tanner Community Center, Jojo said in jest. Yeah, well, we'd have to talk to Ricky or Eric about that. We have money, but not that kind of money. I wonder if it's for sale, Bella said softly. Let's find out, Mark said, but if we buy another community center, we'd have to find someone to manage it, etc. It's just a thought, Jojo said. Let's just look into it. Wasn't the foundation in charge of hiring Rose and Mrs. Murphy? Yes, and I'd say they did a good job on that. I would say the same thing, so, it couldn't hurt to look into it. Nope, couldn't hurt, Mark said, and actually, the foundation has taken in so much money now that if this building isn't too expensive, the foundation can actually buy it. I think I'll do some real research on the area and seriously look into it. Cool, Logan said. I think it's cool that the school you went to as a kid could become Gabe Tanner Community Center. It's kind of poetic, like a resurrection of sorts. Jojo grinned at his brother. You think everything is poetic. Logan smiled and shrugged. It's just where my mind goes. Which is why you write such beautiful songs, Bella said. Logan smiled. Thanks, Mom. They drove on past and finally took a right onto Alatuna Drive. They pulled up in front of a tiny split-level home. They got out of the car and stood looking up at the house as they waited for Joey to pull in behind them and get their kids out of the car. Joey joined Mark as both of them smiled at the small house. It looks really small, Joey said. Even smaller than I remember. Looks the same to me, Mark said. So Shelley donated the house to Angels Foundation to help homeless women, Breeze asked. Mom donated the use of the house. She still owns it. And right now, the house is empty because the woman who lived here got married and moved out just 2 weeks ago. And Angel says someone else is moving in next week, just in time for Christmas, Joey answered. A young family, mother, father, and 3 children. And the mother is sick with multiple sclerosis and needs care. Aw, Bree said, we should do something special for them since they'll be living in the same house that you guys grew up in. We should find out what's being done for them and see if we can assist. At least give them a nice Christmas. Joey smiled. I'll leave that to you. Talk to Angel, find out the circumstances, and whatever you and Bella decide, I'm all in. Bree smiled. Oh, this will be awesome. Jojo smiled. Feeding 5,000 plus people and listening to their stories, it's opening hearts and eyes. So once again, Gabe is continuing to help people without even realizing it. They went inside, and Mark's and Joey's wives and children were truly blown away by how tiny the home was. They showed their children their very small bedroom and explained how they had bunk beds. They took them through the house and told stories about their childhood. They talked about how their mom was attacked in this very house. Eric paid to have the entire home renovated, and it was much nicer after that. They went out into the backyard and told the children about the trampoline, and the first time they met Ricky, he jumped on the tramp with them. They spent a good hour or so talking and reminiscing. When they left the house, most everyone was pretty silent, each thinking their own thoughts. They were hungry and decided that they had time to eat before they headed to the airport to meet up with the Kinos and Wallaces. They spotted a small local restaurant and headed inside. They sat near the back, but that didn't deter the people that spotted them. The first person was actually a part of the Apple Martial Arts umbrella, a young man A young man, maybe mid-20s, came to their table, a big smile on his face, and he spoke to Joey. "Excuse me, but Master Adams?" Joey nodded and smiled. "Yes." "I'm so sorry to interrupt your meal with your family, I presume." Joey nodded again. "Yes." He stood. "I'm Jared Owens. I train at Apple Martial Arts just down the street, and you came in there several years ago, and you spoke to the class and gave me some pointers, and I'll never forget it. And I just wanted to say thank you. In a way, you changed my life, and I promised myself if I ever saw you in person again, I'd tell you how grateful I am." He extended his hand, and Joey shook it. "May I ask, Jared, how me giving you some pointers changed your life?" "Yes, sir. I'm happy to share it with you. I share the story a lot," he said with a smile. "I was working on one of my kicks, and you came over to instruct me, and you asked me if I lived nearby, and I told you that I did not. I told you that I lived with my mother and kid brother several miles away, and that I'd gotten into trouble, and being in the class was part of my probation." Joey nodded. "Ah, yes. I think I remember you now. I remember thinking that it was a wise decision on the judge's part. And then I learned from your master that he was friends with the judge, and that's why the judge had so much faith that you being in Master Dutton's class would change your attitude." "Oh, and it did, sir. Master Dutton has been like a real father to me. But it was also something you said to me, Master Adams. You told me first that anything worth doing was worth doing well, and to practice that kick until I perfected it. And you told me no matter what I did to get into that trouble, whether I was guilty or innocent, it didn't matter. That sometimes things are put in our path to help us to learn or to grow or to get better. And I asked you who would put things in my path, and you said that God would, but not to punish me, but to hone me, because he loves me. And you said you understood that my life had been hard so far, and that it's how I handled it that will affect how the rest of my life will go. And like at the time, I was all offended because I felt like life was unfair and I was innocent and here having to attend a stupid martial arts class. But you said, guilty or innocent. You said if I was innocent and it seemed unfair, to remember that there was another man who went to the cross and he too was innocent. It changed my life and my mother's life and my little brother's life, and now that's what I do." "What do you do?" "I change lives. I'm an instructor at Apple Martial Arts, and I'm a youth pastor for the Kingdom's kids at the Church of Christ over in Jonesboro." Joey teared up as did the others at their table. "Jared, congratulations, young man. I am proud of you." "Thank you, sir. And I'm sorry to interrupt your meal with your family, but if you're ever in town again, please come by if you have time." "Oh, I'd love that." Jared handed him a card, and Joey put it away. Excuse me. The young man started to turn away and turned back. "Oh, my goodness, I just realized who you're with." "Master Adams," Jared said as he extended his hand to Mark. Mark stood and shook his hand. Jared turned to Jojo and Logan. "And my Kingdom kids are going to be totally freaked out that I got to see Jojo Adams and Logan Adams. Logan, they follow you because you're like on Gabe Tanner's website all the time, and they love Gabe and Taylor, and my kids are chomping at the bit to buy your first album." Logan stood and shook his hand. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Jared, and tell them all I'm depending on them." "I will. And Jojo, we're all like Georgia fans, but we all love USC too because of you. We were crushed when you got hurt." Jojo stood and shook his hand using his left hand. It's okay. I'll recover and tell your kids whatever God's will is for me. That's all I want to do. So if playing pro isn't what he has for me, I'm good. I just want to do his will, and I trust him. Jared teared up. Well, that's beautiful, and I will tell them exactly what you said. He turned to smile at the women. Jared, Joey went on, this is my wife, Breeze, Mark's wife, Bella, Mark's daughter, Em, and my children, Sophia, Kelston, and Ledger. He nodded and smiled. It's so nice to meet you all. And again, sorry to interrupt, and thank you all so much for your kindness. I'm going to get out of your way. He turned and walked away, then stopped and came back. Oh, and what you all just did at the feeding of the 5,000, you have inspired a nation. Okay, I'm done. Thanks again. He turned and walked away. They all sat back down and tried to finish their meal, but several minutes later, 2 young guys approached the table. Excuse me, one said, but we couldn't help but hear when that dude was talking to you. Are you JoJo Adams? JoJo stood and nodded. Yes. The quarterback? Yes, he said with a smile and a nod. Wow. Well, we didn't want to take up your time, but we're big fans of yours. Can we get a pic and we'll leave you alone? The guys are not going to believe that we spoke to you without a pic. The guys on our team. We play for Central Clayton High School. Cool. What position? I'm the quarterback. He's my best receiver. JoJo smiled. Well, don't let the other guys know that. So how'd your season go? It was a rough year. Lots of injuries. We were 6-4. JoJo nodded. Juniors? Yeah, we got to make it happen this next year. Well, good luck. And yes, let's get a pic. They took a pic, shook hands, and left. Only a few minutes later, a couple of girls, almost giddy with excitement, approached the table. Hey, one said, smiling brightly. We're sorry to bother your family, but I mean, you're Logan Adams, right? Logan smiled and stood. Yes. We watch you on YouTube and on Gabe Tanner's website. You are amazing. Logan smiled. Well, thank you so much. So we were hoping you might sign our shirts and let us get a picture. Joey and Mark grinned as Logan's face turned red. Breeze smiled widely, and Bella glowed with pride. One of the girls handed Logan a marker and pointed to her sleeve. Logan quickly signed both girls' sleeves and took a selfie with them, and when the girls left, Mark spoke. Everyone, gobble up fast. We got to get out of here. Next thing we know, they'll be asking Fia to sign something. New scene. It's still November 30th. It's Saturday, noon, at the Gabe Tanner Community Center. Rose smiled as she finished sending a joint text to her father and sisters, Daisy, Lily, and Violet. She read it over. Mike called to give us the approximate time for the shoot, tentatively this Wednesday, December 4th, at the Main Street Market at 8 a.m. Not sure what he'll think of the wound on your forehead, Daisy. Also, I'm sending you an audio file. I thought you should hear the other things Mike said to me, especially you, Daisy. Let me know what you think. Rose sent the text and then airdropped the audio file. What are you grinning at? Jericho asked her as he came into her office with a large box. I was thinking about the reactions that my father and sisters will have when they hear the audio file I just sent them. What's on the audio file? Iris being cute as usual? She glanced at her little sister, who was curled up in a chair looking through a Christmas catalog. Rose shook her head. I wish. No. It's a recording of the conversation I had with Mike yesterday. He was his usual asinine self, and I was smart enough to get by to record the whole thing. May I hear the whole thing? She shrugged. Sure. But let me warn you, you're not going to like it. Well, I already assumed that. Jericho listened carefully to the file, his face darkening. Finally, he took the earbud from his ear and turned to her. I hate the way he talks to you. Me too. He's maddening. He wasn't like that in the beginning. He was so charismatic. He's a good actor. He even had my father fooled. Well, to do that, he must have been a good actor. But anyway, Rose, way to give it right back to him. Good job on that. The way you put him in his place, I think I just fell completely in love. Rose smiled. You shouldn't joke about something like that. Who says I'm joking? When she looked shocked, he went on quickly. Anyway, he did say one thing that was absolutely correct. What? You really are one gorgeous chick. Rose snorted. He grinned. So, did you have plans for lunch before the big crowd of kids get here? Well, Rebecca and I thought we'd order something and then try to talk you into going to pick it up for us. I'd be happy to do that for you, if I can pay. No, you can't. It's part of the expense of running this place. Then consider it my donation. Rose sighed. Okay, deal. They both turned as Daisy and Brody strode into the center and called Rose's name. Iris's eyes lit up and she jumped out of the chair and went running to see her sister. Daisy, Daisy, Iris called as she ran to her sister. As usual, Daisy scooped her up and hugged her. What are you up to, sweet girl? Daisy said. I went to the swings with Gabe and Tara and came with us, and we had to come, and then Gabe took me here because he had to do fighting, and I couldn't go. But some more kids are coming over to make decorations for the Christmas tree, and Erwin is going to come help, but not Fia or Kel or Angelina because they had to go back home. She ended with a very sad-looking frown. Aw, well, I'm sorry the other kids had to go back home, Daisy said, but I bet they're missing you too. Iris smiled again. But Taylor is going to stay for another whole week. Well, yay for Taylor, Daisy quipped. You mean yay for Gabe, Brody put in. Iris smiled up at the big man. Hi, Brody. Are you going to stay too? He bent down. Well, I'm going to stay for 2 more days, today and tomorrow, and then I have to go home because I have to go to school. She frowned. Gabe doesn't have to go to his school anymore. He has to go away to another school. She frowned and then smiled. But he's going to stay here for Christmas. I'm so happy he's staying, Brody said. You sure do love your brother, don't you? She grinned. I sure do. They all laughed. I was about to send Jericho to pick up lunch. Can we get some lunch for you too? Rose asked. Sure, Brody said, but I get to pay. I already have it covered, Jericho said. What would you like? Rose asked. I'm not picky, whatever Jericho was having. Daisy? Rose asked. She smiled. Whatever you're having. Rose smiled. So, what are you two up to today? Well, Daisy began with a smile. We're spending the whole day together. We just attended class with Master Apple. Really? How did that go? It was awesome, actually, Brody said. I'm a little rusty because it's been nothing but baseball, but it was a super hard workout, so that was good for me. And your brother, I mean, oh my gosh, where does he get it? Rose nodded. Ever since Grandmaster Kino took him under his wing to train him, he's been like a beast, unstoppable. Yeah, he was amazing. They did this little demonstration between Gabe and Master Apple, and it was mesmerizing. And Daisy, he stopped and shook his head. I had no idea Daisy was as good as she is. I couldn't keep my eyes off of her. I bet, Jericho put in. Daisy made a face. And then after class, we took a walk up Main and talked to a bunch of people who were out decorating their storefronts. It was really nice, and everyone wanted to know about Brody. Of course they did, Rose said. Small town people like to know what's going on and who's visiting their town. Anyway, and now we're here to volunteer to help with more decorating, and then we're going out tonight. Jericho smiled. So finally, a real date. They've all been real, Daisy said. We've been dancing to the music of a famous country star. We've been to dinner at the home of famous movie stars. We've gone horseback riding together. We've gone to breakfast together. We've taken care of puppies together. We've been to a martial arts class together, and we're about to have lunch together. I guess that means we're dating, Brody said firmly. I guess it does mean that, Daisy agreed with a sweet smile directed at the handsome guy next to her. How fun is that? Rose added and then changed the subject. Daisy, Rose began, did you get my text? About the shoot? Yes, maybe my hurt head will get me out of it. Maybe, but it's actually looking better and they might be able to cover it with makeup or just shoot you from one side. Daisy nodded. Did you listen to the audio file? Jericho asked. Not yet. Well, you probably should, and let Brody listen too, just for fun. Rose gave Jericho a dark look. Jericho Jones, do you like making trouble? He grinned. Okay, Daisy said innocently, wondering what that was all about. They went into the gym and sat in a couple of folding chairs by the door and played the audio. When it was done, Daisy looked up at Brody. He didn't look too happy, and she gave him a smile. Brody, don't pay any attention to what he says. He only said it to get to Rose, not because he's actually attracted to me. If you stood us all up together, he probably wouldn't remember who was who except for Rose. He just picked a name. Brody nodded. I get what you're saying, and I'm sure you're right. Still, I don't think I like the idea of you working with this guy, even for a day. I mean, I wish I could be here to keep an eye on you. Well, don't worry, I'll be okay. My dad will be there, and Jericho and CJ. He wouldn't dare show out on the shoot like he does when he thinks no one is watching. And my father was copied on this audio, so who knows? The shoot might not happen at all, though as Rose says, we don't want to hurt Twin Wave Beauty. Brody smiled. I love that you ladies are thinking beyond yourselves to how your actions might affect others. She shrugged. Well, I'm sure Twin Wave didn't know what a jerk Mike is when they hired him, because we, too, were totally sold on his integrity. I'll give him that. He's a good salesman. He's also a narcissistic pig, but I don't hate him. He just doesn't know. He doesn't understand what's important, and he's trying to fill a void, and it's not working. I kind of feel sorry for him, but I have no idea how to help him. Well, me neither, except to pray for him and that the right lessons will be put in his path. Daisy smiled. Well, if he tries anything while he's here in Pine Forest, my father might end up being that lesson. Brody chuckled. Oh, I wish I could stay, if only to see that. Daisy laughed. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, she quoted. He nodded. Let's go see what we can do to help decorate until lunch gets here. New scene. It's still November 30th. It's 4 p.m. Saturday afternoon at the Keith home, Huntington Beach, California. Logan gathered the flowers from the front seat of his car, straightened his clothing, smoothed his hair, and headed toward the front door. He'd called Mr. Keith to see if they were home, or more importantly, to see if Melody was home. He made him promise to keep the secret and headed over after he stopped to buy flowers. He drew a deep breath and rang the doorbell. He heard Melody call, I got it, Mom, and he smiled. Perfect. The door opened. Delivery, he said, and then lowered the flowers. There was an ear-splitting squeal. Logan, she screamed as she fumbled with the lock on the screen door. She finally opened it and jumped into his arms. He stumbled back a few steps but held her tight and didn't let go. He buried himself in the essence that was this amazing girl. Her hair smelled so good. Her body pressed against him felt so good. He'd been trying to focus on the task at hand while he was gone, but now he was remembering how much he missed her, how much he cared for her, how much he craved being near her. He set her back a moment. Let me just look at you, he said softly. She smiled up at him as he cupped her face in his hands. He looked deep into her eyes. Wow, Mel, I sure missed you. I don't think I can ever do that again. Do what? Go away from you for a whole week. She nodded. Good. Don't ever do that again. I tried so hard to do what you told me and concentrate on the present moment, but you were always there in the back of my mind. I'd wondered what you would be saying or thinking, or as we went and ministered to the homeless people. I'm so proud of you for that, Melody, you and your whole family. I can't wait to hear all the stories. Good, then maybe you can stay for dinner, came a voice inside the door. You kids come inside, Mr. Keith said. Logan leaned forward and whispered, I'm going to need to get you alone very soon. She giggled. Let's make that happen. For now, he said as he leaned forward and kissed her. It was not just a short pecking of the lips. Finally, he pulled away and sighed. Oh, Melody. I've been craving that all week long, and it did not disappoint. She sighed. Me too. Come on, let's go say hi to the fam. New scene, still November 30th. It's 7:52 p.m. Saturday evening. Sally's Steakhouse, Pine Forest, Georgia. Brody Smith stared across the table into the bright blue eyes of the girl who's haunted his dreams for about 18 years, and that was saying a lot because they were both only 22. Daisy smiled as she spooned up another bite of cheesecake. This stuff is so good. He nodded. Watching you eat it is also so good. She gave a soft laugh. So, what do you think about Sally's Steakhouse? Not bad for rural Georgia, right? Not bad at all. Actually, really good. The service has been great. My steak was cooked perfectly. Your steak and lobster looked amazing. Oh, it was amazing, she said. Of course, the beef is locally grown, which makes it even better. She nodded. He nodded. She smiled. You finished your dessert so quickly. You want some of mine? He drew a breath. I do. And I'll take some of your cheesecake, too. She giggled. He smiled as she pushed her plate over to him. Go ahead and finish it for me. I'm full. He smiled contentedly and scooped up a large bite. So, Brody, what are you thinking about that's making you smile so much? You? I'm happy, Daisy. I'm really freaking happy right now. I might be happier than I've ever been. Happy about you and me having dinner together? Well, yes, that and so much more. I'm so happy that I found the courage to talk to you, and I'm so happy that you would even consider going out with me. And I'm happy that the more I learn about you, the more I get to know you, the more I realize that I wasn't wrong about you. You are so sweet and so smart and so honest and so freaking beautiful. Hardworking and most of all, spiritual. So spiritual. I mean, I know you love Jesus. You show your faith in everything you do and say. Being around you is like being in heaven. Wow. So, that's embarrassing. I hardly live up to all that. And humble, he added with a twinkle in his eye. She reached across the table and held out her hand, and he looked down at the offering, surprised, but still immediately took advantage of it. He gripped her delicate-looking hand in his big paw and had to close his eyes a second or two to relish the sensation of utter contentment. She wiggled her hand to get him to look at her, then smiled sweetly at him. My turn for some heartfelt words. His heart sped up, wondering what she would say, hoping it wasn't a let's just be friends kind of speech. It wouldn't be right for me to hear you practically pour your heart out without being completely honest with you, Brody. And that's kind of the way I am. I like being honest. I like keeping it real. I don't like to play games or play coy, and so I want to tell you the things that are on my mind. Oh, brother, he thought, here we go. He'd obviously said too much. A guy who, quote, pours their heart out can't come across as cool or confident. He sighed and nodded. I'm listening. Well, first, all the things that you said about me, I could say the same type of things about you. You said I'm smart. Well, I think you are brilliant. You said I'm sweet, and I won't say that about you because I don't want to emasculate you, but I will say that you're kind. You said I work hard, and I happen to know and understand how hard you have to work to be the outstanding athlete that you are. I know how dedicated you have to be, and I've heard from your sister how hard you work at home to help on the ranch when you're not at school, and how you support your family and all of their endeavors, and how you barely have time to even eat before you fall into bed exhausted. When did you and my sister talk? Well, she wasn't talking to me in particular. She was talking to all the women, bragging on her little brother. He smiled. Daisy smiled too and then went on. You said I was pretty, and I'm wondering, Brody, I mean, surely you know that you are a very good-looking guy. When we walked up Main Street today, did you notice all the women staring at you? He rolled his eyes. Whatever. I'm not kidding, but I'll move on since that seems to make you uncomfortable. Good, and by the way, I didn't say you were pretty. I said you were beautiful. She chuckled. Oh, I stand corrected. But really, Brody, I stand corrected, but really, Brody, what I'm getting at is I understand that what you've shared with me. I get that it was hard for you to do that. I understand that you like me, or that you're at the very least interested in me. And I get that it may be more than just a passing interest. And the reason I get that is because I realize that you and I are on the same page spiritually. You are not trying to hook up with me. That is not your goal. Our goal when we date someone is to get to know them and see if that person is a possible lifetime mate. Period. That's our goal. I understand that, and I think that's where you are too. He nodded emphatically. So, Brody Smith, you check all the boxes so far, and I'm interested. If I were a puppy, my ears would be standing straight up and my tail would be wagging. He chuckled at the image. So how's that for being honest, she continued. Do I want you and I to work out? Yes, I do. If that scares you away, so be it. I have to be honest, and like I said, I don't like to play games. You not only intrigue me, Brody, but you have touched my heart in the things you've said to me, the things you've shared with me. How can I not be flattered that of all the girls who have probably thrown themselves at you, the big, strong, good-looking athlete, you turn your attention on little old me. You make me feel like somebody. You make me feel like there really is hope that one day I can have what my parents have. And what is that? A never-ending love story and a big family who loves God and strives hard to do His will. Well, that's a beautiful thing, Daisy, and that's exactly what I want. Exactly. She looked into his eyes. He gazed into hers. Could this trip to Georgia to serve God have gone any better? He realized he hadn't let go of her hand. He gave it a squeeze and let go. Well, what you just said, that is a huge relief. A relief? I was thinking I would lay all my cards out and you would say thanks but no thanks. You seem to be the type to have more confidence than that, Daisy said. I do about most things, but I've liked you for so long, and you didn't seem to even notice me. I guess I lost a little confidence where you're concerned. Well, I guess that's understandable, but it's not that I didn't notice you. It's just that you being younger, I thought it wasn't meant to be. I did notice you. I remember Lily and I talking about we wished we were older because you were a really awesome... I'm sorry. I remember Lily and I talking about we wished you were older because you were a really awesome, really good-looking hottie. He sighed and smiled at her. He didn't know how to respond to that. You ready to get out of here? Sure, but I'm not ready to go home. He grinned. Well, I'm glad about that. How about we go over to that little park next to the center? I'm game. Brody paid the bill and ushered Daisy into his parents' SUV. They drove the short distance and actually pulled into the side parking lot of the center to the farthest spot that was closest to the park. She allowed him to open her door for her, and they walked hand in hand along the walk that went around the perimeter of the park and at certain intervals cut toward the center of the park. In the children's play area, there were swings and a couple of slides, one much higher than the other, and a few other fun things like 6-inch high balance beams and permanent hopscotch boards. They pretty much walked and talked about anything and everything. And finally she took a seat on the swing, and he sat on the swing next to her, and they swayed back and forth, exchanging bits of information about their lives. So, he asked her, you said you know how playing a sport requires dedication. I was wondering, besides martial arts and shooting, what other type sports do you do? I remember something about you playing volleyball in high school. She nodded. Yes, I did. I was okay. I was short, so like Taylor, I played libero, but I was okay. I was quick. Cool. Anything else? Well, my junior and senior years, I played basketball. Like I said, I was short, but I had a great vertical jump and I was quick. I didn't start, but when I was in, I did pretty well. And I already told you about softball. He smiled. I can just see you on the court playing defense, stealing the ball in those cute little shorts. She laughed. Our basketball shorts were not little. They were long and baggy, and I was so short that mine came to my knees, but the volleyball shorts were those tiny, tight, black shorts. He smiled at the thought. Oh, yeah, I guess I was thinking about the volleyball shorts. She sighed. So, I heard that you and your father and my brother have been asked to share your testimonies at church tomorrow about what you experienced at the feeding of the 5,000. He looked at her surprised. How did you hear? I heard Gabe talking to my father about it. Brody sighed. Well, they asked my dad because he's like famous, and that's good for attendance. And they asked your brother because he too is famous, though he swears he's not. I'm not quite sure why they asked me. I mean, Ricky Kino and Brianna Adams are going to be at church. Yeah, but they spoke last time they were here. And why'd they ask you? I mean, you said it yourself, Brody. You said people are starting to know your name, to know who you are. If they do a search for you on the internet, your pics and stats come up. You may not be over the top famous yet, but don't sell yourself short. Oh, I don't, really. Not that being famous is my goal. It most definitely is not. Still, speaking at church is a great opportunity to try out my speech for school because it's about service to others, and I can work that into what happened here at the center. Besides, I'll never turn down an opportunity to talk about my relationship with God. Daisy nodded thoughtfully. Brody, if something happened, like you got injured, or you couldn't play ball anymore, what would you do? He nodded. It was a fair question. Well, I'd go back down on my knees until I know what God wants me to do. I mean, I could work with children. I could work the farm. I'd find something to do. I wasn't really asking what you do for a living. I'm sure you have all kinds of paths you could take. I meant like, how would you feel? Oh, well, I'd feel some disappointment, of course. But no matter what life throws at me, I trust God. He has a plan. And if he needs me to learn to pick up my cross and carry it, then that's what I'll do. I trust Jesus. He is my constant companion. I trust him. Jojo and I talked about this the first night I was here. Actually, Jojo is a shining example of exactly what you're talking about. Daisy nodded. Brody got off his swing and went excuse me. Hold on a second. Brody got off his swing and went around behind Daisy to softly push her swing. Brody, Daisy said softly, looking up at him over her head. I think you are one really awesome guy, and I think God has great plans for you. Now, that is a really nice thing for someone to say. Thank you, Daisy. You're welcome, she said softly. He brought her swing to a stop and came around in front of her. He started to pull her up so he could kiss her, something he'd been wanting to do for a very long time. But suddenly, he heard someone or something approaching from behind him, and he quickly turned to face whatever it was to protect her. He drew in a sharp breath as a large, black dog approached. He stood his ground. Well, hello there, boy, he said firmly. The dog seemed a little afraid, but his tail was wagging. Brody knelt down and turned his back on the dog. Be real still, Daisy, he said softly. The dog sniffed around Brody's back. Brody held out his hand, and the dog ducked his head under it to allow him to pet him. Brody scratched the dog's head and finally turned and spoke calmly to him. Brody, Daisy said, does he have a collar or tags? No, do you, fella? Huh, boy? Daisy slowly stood from the swing so she could see the dog. You know what? Don't you think he looks a lot like George's black puppies? Brody studied the dog. Actually, yes, he does. Or they look like him. Are you the papa dog? Is Georgia your girl? Huh, boy? He smiled at Daisy. You do know what we have to do, right? Daisy nodded. Well, we have to rescue him, and I guess we also need to put his picture and George's picture up at the post office and vet's office to make sure they don't have owners. I suppose we do need to do that too, Brody said. Well, how do we get him to come with us? Daisy asked. How would you feel about giving up your leftovers? She frowned. Okay, now you're asking a lot, but I guess it's for a good cause. Go to the car and get the leftovers and bring them to me, and we'll give him a little bit at a time until we can get him into the car. And that is the end of chapter 18. In my books, even doggies have mates.